All right, awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our Run Your Mile webinar. We strive to deliver high quality, clear and concise health information to help you live your best in 2021. My name is Rachel Robinson. I'm the marketing coordinator for Longevity Physical Therapy. Today we have Dr. Rachel Roesgen, who's one of the physical therapists at our Brushy Ranch Clinic, who will be speaking on the topic of running. Longevity Physical Therapy is a team of compassionate individuals looking to help you move better and live better by addressing your movement challenges through providing excellent and individualized physical therapy. And through this education series, over the course of the year, we strive to deliver high quality, clear and concise health information to help you live your best in 2021. In the coming months, you'll be a part of discussions and webinars on topics ranging from next month, we will be having a golf webinar with our LAPT Tanner Crass. And then later this year, we'll be having a part 2 series on golf with our Brushy Ranch physical therapist, Kevin Greer. And we'll be having more guest speakers and other allied health professionals as well. So please tune in to our monthly newsletters, weekly social media posts, and if you're a patient, signs that are displayed in the clinic for upcoming discussions and on webinars that you, your family members, and friends would want to participate in. After the seminar today, all those who registered and attended will receive a PDF format of Rachel's presentation, as well as you can claim a complimentary wellness screen that can be used to assess on any ongoing pain or injury, or if you'd like to get a check up before a running event, if you have one planned out this year, or if you want to start running, come on in so we can see how we can help you achieve your running goals. Today, I have the pleasure of inviting our Brushy Ranch PT, Rachel Roesgen. She was born and raised in South Orange County, but fell in love with San Diego after running all over the county as a Division I cross country and track student athlete at SDSU. After that, she then earned her doctorate of physical therapy at Cal State Long Beach. Throughout her running career, she has discovered the importance of preventative rehab. She's passionate about finding the primary cause of her patients' injuries to prevent future reoccurrence. She also strives to guide her patients through their rehab to feeling and moving even better than pre-injury. She's looking to further her education with proper certifications in movement analysis rehab, especially with running, golf swing, and baseball pitching mechanics. She still loves to run, speaking as she is a 3-time Boston Marathon qualifier. She also implements all sorts of activities like hiking, yoga, Peloton, cycling classes, HIIT training, weightlifting, and Pilates into her weekly routine. In her free time, she loves to be with close family and friends, usually with some sort of delicious Mexican food involved. Rachel and her fiance love watching sports together, exploring new beaches and restaurants in San Diego, and planning getaways to Temecula or to the local mountains. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Rachel Roesgen.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to hit share screen now, right, Rach?
Yes, ma'am.
You got it. All right, let me get this locked and loaded here. Oh, don't do this to me now. All right, okay, we're good. All right, everybody. Hi again. I'm Rachel, the other Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. I'm, like Rachel was saying, I am a physical therapist at our Longevity PT, our local office here in Brushy Ranch, Carlsbad. And I'm here to talk to you today about running. Here's a little bit of what we're going to go through today. I'd like to welcome everyone firsthand, though. I always say it takes a crazy special kind of crazy to really enjoy running and run for fun. So I'm just glad there's so many of you out there that are just like me. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go through things like this: running movement analysis, common running injuries, running injury prevention, current running research, and running training schedules. But first, I wanted to kind of introduce myself even a little bit more than Rachel already did. She did a fantastic job, but kind of wanted to highlight why I was chosen to give this discussion on this topic. Like Rachel said, I ran at San Diego State. I've been running for about 15 years now and competitively for about 11. So ever since the 6th grade, I've been trying my act at running. With that, I was able to earn that college scholarship to San Diego State. Right after that, I quickly transitioned to being a coach at Santa Margarita Catholic High School, which I was so fortunate to be a part of the CIF winning track team while I was there. And then I also quickly went to becoming a marathoner. That's kind of my jam. I do a little bit of half marathons here and there, but I honestly feel like they're too short and fast. So I stick to the fulls. And then I've qualified for 3 Boston marathons. I've been lucky enough to run 1. Gonna hit that up to 10 at some point. That's my goal. So yeah, let's get right into it then. Okay, so we're gonna start with running movement analysis, which essentially means running form, analyzing your running form. In the clinic, we can do this, but first I wanna mention that it is so important to have your form analyzed, because if you think about it, if there's even a little bit of something off in your form and something that can predispose you to an injury, you're doing that repetitively for 40, 60, 70 miles a week. And that can really compound exponentially on each other and really hit you to that injury. So it's so important to have your running form as close to really well done as possible. And in the clinic, we can use this app called Huddle. We have it on our iPads here. And what it allows you to do is I can put you on a treadmill. We'll figure out kind of your self-selected speed, your average running speed. And what the Huddle app will let me do is slow down your running to all the way to 1/8 of your speed, so that I can really take a look at it. That's what we're doing here in these photos. This is me on our treadmill here. In the clinics too, our longevity, we practice applied functional science, which is where these transitional zones terms come from. Transitional zone 1 essentially just means putting your weight into that front foot, how you kind of load into it, kind of our loading response in our gait cycle. And transitional zone 2 is more of when we're propelling off that back foot, when that back leg is extending behind, as you can see here, kind of that initial swing, pre-swing phase of gait. So what we'll do is I'll get a good about 30 seconds of a video, and then I can look at it from the side view and the back view. From the side view, I'm looking at a few different things. I'm looking at your foot strike pattern. Are you a heel striker? Are you a midfoot striker? Are you even a forefoot striker? What's going on there? And then I can take a look at exact precise angles at these 2 particular times in the running cycle, which you can see I've drawn on with all of these lines here on myself. And then I got my handy dandy chart here nearby to kind of see what's maybe a little bit more or less than what it's truly kind of the normal range would be. And then I can look at this thing called overstriding. I'm super guilty of this. As you can see in the left-hand photo, my heel should really hit the contact of where that yellow line is sitting right here. As you can see, I'm a little bit in front of that. I got pretty long legs and they like to just do their thing. So that's something I'm constantly working on, but that's a good identifier, because in overstriding, that could lead to is you have a high braking force, and that could really predispose me to things such as stress fractures, stress injuries, shin splints, anything that kind of has a high impact. And then the other thing we're going to look at kind of from the side is a vertical displacement. How much are you bouncing? For the ladies out there, we call it the ponytail sign. How high is that ponytail bouncing? We can kind of take a look at that. And that'll just, if we have a higher vertical displacement, we'll be running a little bit less efficient, therefore taking a little bit longer to get across the finish line. Oh no, it's not letting me go. Hold on. Hopefully that doesn't keep happening. No. Sorry, hold on 1 second. There we go. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and look at the back view too, with that whole app. Yes?
We can't see your slides.
No. Thank you. All right, right here's where I wanna be. Thank you, Rachel. We good now? Yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, so now we can take a look at the back view too. What I'm looking at here is I can take a little bit more of your heel motion. Are you an overpronator? Are you an oversupinator? Are you kind of right in the middle? Can I see if you're doing a toe in or a toe out, which could really predispose you to some injuries there? especially in the knees. And then I'll take a look at this thing called a knee window, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. There's not a lot of space in between that runner's knees. Ideally, we want some space because we don't want that knock knee pattern that can lead to a lot of knee injuries as well. And then I'll take a look at your step width, which just basically means you're stepping one right over the other. That would predispose you to a little bit of less efficiency as well. And then the last thing we'll look at is a thing called pelvic drop, which is these bottom two photos here on the left-hand side. What that will do, both of these runners are in a left stance. They're on their left leg. And if we see a pretty good drop of that right side of their pelvis down, it's usually a pretty good indication that they have some either glute weakness or glute neuromuscular control deficits, which could really predispose you to injuries down the chain as well. I don't know why it's not letting me switch over, H. Got it. Okay. So now I'm going to take a look at just kind of some injuries in general. Running is pretty much like, I kind of describe it as golf. There's like a lot of creative ways that you can injure yourself. So for the interest of time, I'm going to be going for a few different injuries in each category. I'll kind of highlight some of the more common ones, but I did want to note that there's 36 million runners in the United States alone, and up to 80% of them get injured, which is a really high number. So it's very common in this population. Okay, we're going to start with the foot. Very commonly seen in some runners and honestly about a bunch of other patients is this thing called plantar fasciitis. I'm sure we've all heard of it. It's that super sharp pain right at the bottom of your foot, especially when you first start walking around in the morning. I see this a lot of times too with people that have flat feet due to that stretched out plantar fascia. Quick side note though, so all of these injury slides on the left-hand side is going to be a little bit more patient-friendly language. The causes kind of in that. And then that right-hand column is the physical therapy exam. So that'll be a little bit more physical therapist language, but I'll do my best to kind of explain what's going on. But essentially, if you're not a PT out there, just know that the PT exam is going to look at all the potential causes in the left-hand column. So flat feet, like I was saying there. Also too, this often is caused by, is your foot doing a lot of the work because your ankle is super tight? Is your foot taking up a lot of this force? So I'm going to take a look at your ankle range and mobility. I'm going to take a look at those tight calves that can be limiting that ankle. And then I'm going to take a look at a lot of the foot. There's a ton of tiny little muscles in your foot. I'm going to take a look at those to see if those can really support you for a long period of time while you're running. And then also too, if you have a lot of that poor ankle control, your ankles are kind of doing a lot, that plantar fascia usually tends to get a little bit messed or a little bit pissed off at you and inflamed. So for the PT exam, what I'm going to do here is first, we got to make sure it's true plantar fasciitis. Is the fascia on the underside of your foot, the outermost muscle layer, really the problem here? I've seen this present itself with a few other situations too. Perhaps those intrinsic muscles of the foot, the tiny muscles down there, are a little bit bothered too, and it's presenting with the same pain. I've even seen this come from the glutes. I've seen this come from a glute nerve entrapment, a sciatica type of entrapment in the glute, presenting all the way down in the foot, feeling a lot like plantar fasciitis. So we need to make sure that's truly what's going on first. So I'll take a look at that. And then I'll take a look at your standing posture. Do you have those low arches? I'll take a look at your ankle mobility. Do you have enough ankle mobility up the chain to allow your foot to kind of do its thing? Or is your foot having to do more work because your ankle's super tight? And then how are those muscle strength that we were talking about? And then of course, with everything, I'm going to take a look at how you move. How do you walk and how you run, especially if this is what you're coming in for. So these pictures down here are going to be PT treatment. The first thing on the left-hand side is what we call in our applied functional science here in the clinic, a TZ1 ankle mob. So still that transitional zone 1 that we showed in the first photo is how your ankle kind of loads into it, how it absorbs that force when you hit the ground when you're running. So what this PT is doing is applying a talocurl posterior glide, at the same time a subtalar eversion mob, and then pulling them into dorsiflexion, just seeing how that feels. And if that's a little bit tight, we'll start working on that. And then the second picture is like a soleus length test. So if that's tight, we're going to stretch that out. The picture right next to it too is me and one of our awesome, you can see it back here, true stretch cages in our clinic, doing a calf stretch. We'll do that in 3 planes, of course. And then we're going to take a look at those intrinsic foot muscles. Can you do those toe push-ups? Can you control that foot? And then we'll move it a little bit more towards running. So the picture of the gal in the pink socks is her maintaining a good tibialis posterior contraction, a good foot arch, building up that arch while she's stepping over and has that TheraBand cue there. And then one of my favorite things for getting patients back to running is this thing called an anti-gravity treadmill. It is fantastic. We have one here in the clinic. I'll show you a little bit later. It's right there. Basically what it allows you to do is exactly how it sounds. It allows you to unweight your body and run at certain percentages of your body weight. So you can run at 50% of your body weight. It kind of feels like running on the moon. That way, when you're running, you can have a little bit less force going through your foot and still able to run and get back to what you want to do even quicker. There we go. Up into the next one is this thing called MTSS syndrome, or shin splints is what it's more commonly known as. I see this a ton. I saw this a ton when I was a high school coach too, usually with a lot of people that have like shoes that are 10 years old or they've basically run through them. Essentially how this syndrome works is your shin takes up a lot of the shock absorption over other things down the chain, your shoes, your ankles, everything like that. So it could either be caused with that tight, the two anatomical type causes is going to be a little bit more biomechanical, is these tight muscles in the lower limb really pulling on the shin bone, pulling on the tibia. Or it could be that shin bone is taking up a lot of the force and actually causing like a bending force through that bone, and it's getting inflamed that way. So kind of the same thing with plantar fasciitis. I'm gonna look at your ankle mobility, your ankle control, your calf length. How is our ankle moving, and can we absorb the force through the ankle rather than reverting it all to the shin? And also too, overtraining, this happens a lot, just a lot of impact over and over and over again on in this situation where you have that little bit tighter ankle and it's that shin is just really taking up all the force. And then, like I said, those old running shoes, which we will get to later at a later slide, promise. And then so for the PT exam, we're going to take a look at what's going on. We definitely want to identify if it's true, these MTSS syndrome, usually pretty easily identified with palpation down the posterior medial aspect of the tibia along 5 centimeters, usually lights it up, pretty localized right there. So we'll take a look at that. But of course, we'll do investigating if that's not necessarily what I think is going on. We'll do some standing posture. How are your arches? Are they flat again? Same thing with plantar fasciitis. How's that ankle moving? How are those plantar flexors moving? But also too, what I'll look here, there's been research on plantar flexor endurance leading to this, like a lack thereof, leading to this syndrome. So what we would do is you could do like a single heel rise test where you're coming up on one toe over a full minute, and then comparing that to the non-involved side and seeing if you have a little bit less endurance on that side and potentially predisposing you to this injury. Then of course, we're gonna take a look at how you move, walking, running, all of those lovely things. And then the PT treatment, a little bit from the before slide too, but this far left-hand picture down here is a self ankle mob. So that one I showed you before with the therapist doing that, this is a way that for you to do it at home. And I find this really effective for patients that have a really tight ankle joint. And then of course we'll do our calf stretch. And then if we do need some help with those loading mechanics, helping that calf muscle strength, those plantar flexors, we will go into some concentric and some eccentric strengthening of them. I really like this photo or this exercise specifically. This is kind of in that running form where that back leg is behind you and really needs to do a lot of the work for your calf. And you can kind of have some TheraBand resistance there. But then also I want to work on how you load into that ankle. So this is Kristen here. She's hanging out on one of our squat clock mats in our clinic. And what I'll do with that one is have you stand in the middle on one foot and then reach to a bunch of different directions. Just training your calves to really control that movement and have that whole, really have that control while you're running. And then two, like I said, we'll get to a slide later on running shoes and running shoe inserts, but we do have these in the clinic. They're called the Power Step. Sometimes you just need some good support in your shoes, and that'll really help this syndrome. And then of course, again, we have the Alter G, so much fun. That's that bottom right-hand corner picture. Here we go. Okay, in the knee. So the knee, basically over those 80% of the injuries that happen in the United States of the 36 million runners, 50% of them are knee injuries, and over 50% of the knee injuries are in this joint, specifically the patellofemoral joint. And oftentimes I see it as patellofemoral pain syndrome. This syndrome is kind of an overarching term. In runners, most commonly what I see, and it essentially just means some pathology going on with this joint specifically, so the kneecap to the femur joint on your knee. But what I most often see is more of a patellar maltracking. So something where your patella is being pulled laterally, and it's really causing this soreness, this general soreness in your knee, this clicking, this popping. And oftentimes I see this as super sharp shooting pain kind of at random instances throughout your run, walk, sitting and standing, stuff like that. So we're going to take a look at that. Usually it's being pulled laterally. Usually in runners, it's due to some really tight IT bands or quads, especially on the outside. When we run, we kind of operate at like 60% of your like max contraction of your TFL muscle, which attaches to your IT band, can then cause a lot of tightness down the outer sides of the leg, kind of predisposing you to that lateral pull of the patella. The patella should stay in a pretty relatively straight track, a little bit of lateral, but not too much. So when we get pulled a little bit more, we're getting that clicking, popping pain sensation. And then I see this a lot too in runners that have like a weaker quad and glute or weaker neuromuscular control of that, where they're collapsing inward when they're running. They're really allowing those knees are knocking in, that knee window is missing. So for your exam, we're going to see what's going on there. Do you have a resting posture that's already predisposing you to this thing we call genu valgus, those knees knocking in situation? Do you have a leg length discrepancy? And usually that's a functional, where one leg is a little bit longer than the other, not that much, hopefully, just a little bit. But what you can see from that is sometimes it's pretty easily fixed in the pelvis. So we'll take a look at that to see if something's a little off kilter for you. And that can predispose you to some asymmetrical running. We'll take a look at your hips, especially that rotational range of motion. We'll take a look at those tight muscles I mentioned earlier, and it's those weak muscles I was also mentioning that could predispose you to that knock knee syndrome. And then I love doing a single leg squat test on these runners or on these patients specifically to really see if they're able to control themselves in a single leg squat without a lot of knee movement happening throughout the chain. You'd be surprised by the number of patients I have in here that are triathletes, Ironman triathletes, can do all of these races, but can't do a single leg squat properly. It's kind of amazing. So we'll take a look at that. And then we'll take a look, of course, how you move, running and walking, see if you have that pelvic drop, that sign of some glute weakness, see if you have that knee window situation going on. And then to treatment, we have a pretty good short-term relief. This bottom left-hand picture is called a McConnell taping. What we can do is physically put tape kind of over the knee and just kind of help that patella align a little bit better. This I like to do a little bit more short-term. Ideally, I want to train your quads and your glutes and all the neuromuscular control of your whole leg to do this for you so that you can guide that patella a little bit more naturally without having to use tape. But this is a pretty good short-term solution. And then lady in the pink is doing a little bit of that TFL stretch. If there's a lot of lateral tightness, we'll go for one of those. The IT band itself doesn't like to be stretched. There's been studies showing that they just can't get a lot of elongation out of it with stretching, but we do find that there is benefits to stretching the muscle it's attached to, the TFL, and that's what she's doing there. And then we have the true stretch here. That is a quad stretch on the true stretch. I'll show you that a little bit later. And then we'll go into some training. I love putting these patients in front of the mirror so you can really see what's going on. You could see that knee knocked in position if that's what's happening. You can see your foot collapsing inward and learn to identify it and fix it on your own. And then we translate it to running. So we'll do some single leg squat. We'll do some TheraBand resisted stuff. And then you guessed it, and maybe we'll get on the Ultra G a little bit too, because that's one of all the runners seem to really like that. Okay, and then sciatica, another hot topic in the injury world. I hear this all the time. Most oftentimes for runners, it's kind of more of that piriformis syndrome sciatica. So what that is there is that, what was I saying? Yes, it's a little bit more in those hip rotators. So you'll get that pain in your glutes, and that shoots down the back of the leg, the common sciatica symptom. It's important to note, though, too, that this type of symptomology can be coming from a couple of other entrapment sites for the sciatic nerve specifically, be coming from your back before it becomes a sciatic nerve, be coming from a couple other hip rotators besides the piriformis muscle, even down a little bit lower into the leg. So it's super important to kind of identify the cause, but most oftentimes in runners, I see this specifically. Some of the causes is exactly those tight glutes back there, oftentimes because those tight rotators back there, oftentimes because the glutes overlying them are a little bit weak. So the piriformis, all of those hip rotators feel like they really have to take over and control the running form. Sometimes too, we'll see a little bit of that pelvic asymmetry, a little bit of that either shifted or rotated a little bit, and that just predisposes your piriformis muscles to be a little bit off kilter, a little bit already pre-tight perhaps. And now we're just aggravating them a little bit more. Another thing too is the symptoms usually is the nerve being impinged. So it is within usually the piriformis being tight, but the piriformis muscle sits over the sciatic nerve most commonly. So with that being said, if that piriformis is really tight, it's going to clamp down on that sciatic nerve and cause the pain. So we're going to take a look at, is that sciatic nerve entrapped, able to move, or is there something else going on? Sometimes too, this is kind of uncommon, but I've seen this a few times. While you're swinging through your running cycle, sometimes I see your foot kind of going outward every time you swing and then coming back in. That's doing like an open chain external rotation of your hip, which is exactly what that piriformis muscle does for your limb. So that'd be like sitting there doing a bunch of bicep curls all day long. Like over time, your bicep is going to get aggravated and sore at you, and then perhaps even tight. So if we're seeing that in the running gait, that can predispose you to this as well. And then I see this a lot too in non-runners. Someone that sits a lot, drives a lot, really is sitting on those glutes. Even new parents, I see this a lot in new moms, new dads that have young kiddos at home. They're often sitting on the floor, usually in a crisscross applesauce kind of a situation. And they're sitting right on those rotators, and the rotators don't like to be sat on for too long. They'll get pretty tight. So with the PT exam, I'm going to kind of go through those rotators, see if it truly is that piriformis muscle specifically that is causing. Usually you can reproduce it pretty easily. We're going to take a look at that leg length discrepancy again. Is one of your legs longer than the other? Like I was talking about, that rotation, and that's something that we can fix, which actually I'll point you to now. This bottom picture right here is a muscle energy technique that can fix a rotation in the pelvis. And I have my patients that I find this in do this first thing in the morning, so that the whole day you're kind of starting a little bit more symmetrical after that. And you're putting some equal forces through your legs without having, while you're running, especially without having it go through a little bit asymmetrical off kilter kind of posturing. Then we'll take a look at your strength. We'll take a look at your nerve irritation, of course, how you move. If you have that pelvic drop, that kind of weak glute situation. And then do I see that external rotation while you're running? And then, so for the short term, usually the first day when I see you, I abide by the roll, stretch, glide method. It works really great to kind of calm everything down in the beginning. So you're going to get on a foam roller like this photo right here. You're going to roll out that piriformis as much as you can tolerate. We don't want to overdo it. And then if that's feeling good, we'll do a little bit stretching if that also is feeling okay for that muscle. And then once we can kind of get that muscle to calm down, we'll do some nerve glides through it. And that is what this situation is going. We'll then floss that nerve through that tight piriformis muscle. Tell it, that nerve, the sciatic nerve, that it's okay to move. You have some room to work with. You're not clamped down forever here. And then once we can get a good idea on that too, we'll definitely start picking up that glute strength or whatever is potentially causing the piriformis to be tight, so that we can prevent that from coming back. And then of course, return to running. Training on the treadmill is super effective. And I also wanted to mention too, one of the most effective kind of manual therapy treatments for this condition is something called ART, which is an active release technique. On the upper hand corner here, you can see that that's our guy Ramon here in our Rusty Ranch clinic. He's fantastic. He has this degree here, and he works with a lot of our patients. He offers a first free session just to see if he can help out this situation. And then he has packages available for purchase. I've had him work with a lot of my patients that have some nerve stuff going on. That way he can help me with the entrapment site specifically, and then I can get them back to a little bit more activity specific stuff, making the most of their treatment sessions. And it's been proven to be very effective. Okay. So that was kind of a dive into a little bit more specific body parts, but I do want to remind everybody that we need to take a step back and really look at the whole body in general. So oftentimes we're having a foot, an ankle, a whatever injury, but it's coming from somewhere else, or it is because of something else. So this is a patient case I wanted to bring forth to kind of talk about and give an example of that. So this is a 23-year-old female runner who describes left shoulder pain. Doesn't come on immediately, but it comes on kind of later into her run, about 30 minutes when I was able to see her. And you're thinking, shoulder pain, why are we getting shoulder pain while we're running? We're not on our shoulders. What's going on there, right? So took a look at her, range of motion, awesome. Little bit of tightness in that kind of anterior muscle group in this situation. And she is showing some positive impingement tests. Something like this is reproducing a little bit of her pain, but not that crippling, that sharp shooting pain she's getting already. We're getting a little bit of pain out of that, but not as much as what she's describing that's stopping her runs. And all of her, she does pretty good with her strength training, like all of her shoulders and her mid-back muscles are pretty good, but we are seeing a little bit of a lower trap deficit there in one of her lower mid-back muscles, but nothing that would kind of predispose her necessarily to this. So why is this happening? So since it happens when she's running, I'm going to take a look at how she is when she's running. Got her on the treadmill. What happened here is I was noticing a little bit asymmetrical step lengths. That right side was a little bit less of a step forward than that left. And while we run, every time we step forward with one, we want to do a little bit of a trunk rotation toward nothing excessive, of course, but a little bit of a trunk rotation as we run. So when she was stepping a little bit less with her right, she was now rotating a little bit less with her right. Not by much, but that picky little eye that I was able to identify, it didn't go as far as it did to the left. And then I started noticing that her shoulder was then taking up the brunt of that rotation. So instead of her rotating properly through her trunk, she was kind of hinging a little bit as she ran and kind of wrenching her shoulder across her body into that impingement zone, that test that we even specifically test for over and over and over again. Like I said, with running, if you have a little bit of a foreign cue off, you do it a gazillion times throughout the week, right? And now you're compounding on top of each other and it's causing some issues. So that was great. Notice that. And I was like, okay, now we can verbally cue her. Let's get a little bit more rotation through there. Let's identify the shoulder. Let's put it a little bit straight, which worked short term, but it was still there. The pain was still there. Why is it happening? So then I had to go and take a further step back and be like, okay, why is she not rotating as much? What is stopping that? Found out that her left hip flexor was crazy tight compared to her right side. So that's a modified Thomas test was positive for a whole negative 10 degrees there. So if you think about it, if I'm stepping forward with my right, I need to have enough time with my left leg getting behind me. If my hip flexor is so tight on the front, I'm not stepping enough back with that left side, therefore not having that as far of a right step length, therefore not having that trunk turn, therefore wrenching with the shoulder. So it's this big old chain reaction happening here. But what I wanted to that was kind of complex, but what I wanted to illustrate here was there's so many different things that could be leading to a deficit and an injury in your running cycle that oftentimes it takes a couple of sessions with a qualified professional to kind of figure out exactly what's going on. And sometimes it's more complicated than it seems. So if you have something going on, especially with running and how it compounds over yourself, you really need to go see a qualified professional. And lucky for you, if you're in our San Diego area, I know a few. Here's everyone that we have at Longevity. They're all fantastic across 3 of our locations, which I'll mention later. But basically what I'm saying, if you're out there, go see a qualified PT and they can really help you out. Not only understand the injury process that you're going through, but what is causing it and how to prevent it in the future. Okay. So now that we talked all about injuries, we're going to talk about how to prevent them. I am a big believer, like Rachel said in my intro, of preventative medicine. Rehab, the best way to rehab an injury is to prevent it from happening. I would rather teach my patients how to do that. That's the best thing I can teach them than how to just put some ice on something and kind of get through their ankle injury, right? I want that never to come back. So I kind of created a little bit of some common practices that if you kind of throw into your weekly routine with running, it'll help you stay away from some of these injuries. And I made them easy to remember. So first one you're going to stretch into your stride. I'll explain. strengthen sideways, and then the third one is switch up your shoes. So stretch into your stride. So what we have here, running is a very sagittal plane movement. So we're using all of our forward, backward muscles, right? And as you can see here, there's me on the right-hand side in one of our awesome True stretch cages. And I'm stretching the hip flexors, the hamstrings, the quads, the calves, everything like that, that you're using a lot that are getting really overworked while you run. Same would go for foam rolling as well, as depicted here. But so basically you want to get on a really good stretch routine with that to prevent those from getting too tight and aggravated. Another one too, we talked about earlier, that IT band stretch. There it is again, super important. And then I'm a big believer in research also supports this in active over passive stretching. Like I'm seeing here, you have me going in and out of these stretches, right? Holding for a couple seconds and repeating more reps. Ideally, you want to do this 1 to 2 times a day, and it's great to do before and after your runs. And then we'll go into strengthen sideways. That's our next little mantra here. Strengthen sideways, I really mean in kind of all 3 planes, but we always forget about the sideways and the twisty plane. We're runners. We always want to go forward, back, right? That's what we're good at. But we got to think about the other ones. And like I said before, you cannot believe how many runners I've seen that are really good at running and can put down mileage after mileage, but can't do a single leg squat. You don't have that type of control, that strength that they need to kind of function. So what I want to highlight here is strengthening. When I say strengthening, it doesn't mean lifting a gazillion pounds on a deadlift. It doesn't mean benching a bunch, nothing like that. Like it can be if that's what you enjoy, but it could be any type of strengthening. It could be body weight stuff. You can get some really effective work with resistance bands, TRX, yogas, Pilates, bar, whatever you're into could be really effective for you. And with my patients, I like to incite this endurance repetition count. So essentially what I'll do with them is if we're doing an exercise that'll have 3 sets, I'll up the reps every set, maybe even the weight if I think they can handle it. So I'll go first set 10, second set 12, third set 15, so that now in your last set, I'm asking you to do more when you're a little bit fatigued and creating that really good stability that you need later into your runs. Yeah. And then this is one of my favorite, the glute activation series, the glute starter pack. This is awesome for runners, awesome for weightlifters too that are getting into a leg day just to really get things warmed up. I love giving this one out. Basically, it's a series where ideally you want to work into staying in that squat form for the entire duration, a very good endurance hold. This is the repetition here goes 1 clamshell, 1 out, right? Like I'm doing here, clamshell the other, double limb out, doing some step backs, doing some sidewalks, doing some monster walks, and then all levels, you can really challenge yourself with this one like I did on that right-hand side with the double band, which is quite difficult. Okay, and then like I said, sideways is great. Do not forget about the rotational plane. We like to forget about that one especially. And so it's just super important to highlight this. I like this one a lot for my runners because again, you're doing that long duration hold with your whole lower body and then really working on that core control and that movement of the upper body up top in all 3 planes. And again, levels for everybody. We could always scheme up harder and easier ways to modify things. Makes my job fun. And then speaking of core work, everyone likes to forget core. I love core. I think everyone should do more core, but that's besides the point. So with running, it's super, super important. Here is a few different iterations of our longevity physical therapy 3D, meaning in all 3 planes, lower extremity overground matrix. And I really like this one too for runners because it's teaching you to hold that core while moving your legs underneath it. So really keeping your core stable as your legs are moving, very similar to an activity that we really like doing, running. Okay, and the last one of this one is switch up your shoes. I get questions about this a lot. Basically, most people have a shoe that they have found. I myself, I'm an Asics Cumulus girl for life. Ever since the 6th grade, I will never leave them. That's what my feet like. That's what they enjoy. There's been research showing even as you need to be comfortable in whatever shoes you are, that's actually going to predispose you to having a better fit and a better, less aggravation of your feet, less blisters, that kind of stuff. So if you found those shoes that work for you, you still got to switch them up every 3 to 6 months or 300 to 500 miles. You'll start seeing wear patterns through them. So that could be a little bit variable. I usually kind of start feeling a little bit achier after my runs and go, okay, I need to switch up my shoes and been right around that 3-month mark. Okay, let's do it now. That way you're not putting, like, especially with that shin splint, you're not getting a lot of that traction force through everything. And then even too, really good to throw some inserts in your shoes. There's a couple different ways you can go about this. Super Feet's really great. I use those myself when I'm going over the counter. They have a bunch of different kinds, or even we have those Power Step ones in the clinic. If you have a little bit of a foot control situation going on, it would be better to be fit into something a little bit more custom and a little bit more beneficial for you. And we can do that here. And really get you going in that regard. And then I wanted to highlight on shoe comparisons, meaning kind of comparisons across brands. This has been widely studied. This is all information from a systematic review over the last 10 years. So a very high level research article. Basically what this is broken down into 3 categories. The first one's those higher cushioning shoes. Essentially, those are the ones that are marketed to runners. They have the Asics, Brooks, Mizuno, New Balance, stuff like that. Saucony, I see a lot too. Those with that little bit of more cushioning have shown to have better shock absorption, which can then decrease those impact injuries. Like we talked about, those shin splints, those stress fractures, those stress reactions even. Let the shoe do the work so the body doesn't have to feel the force. Another one too, it will show a decreased energy cost. So of your body, your shoe will take up some of the energy from the ground. So your body doesn't have to feel it, like I was saying before. So that will improve your performance, allow you to get across that finish line a little bit faster. The knock on some of these shoes is a little bit of decreased sensation of the bottom of your foot. If you have a little bit more cushioning, it's been shown that you can't really feel the bottom of your foot as well. I've found it to be pretty okay. I've only fallen a couple times on some trails, and it's when those rocks come out of nowhere, but that'd be kind of a situation if you're pretty prone to ankle sprains or falls, maybe consider something a little bit less cushioned. Minimalist shoes, these are the Nike, the Adidas, something like that. And then of course those finger toe shoes, the Vibrams, if I'm saying that right. This is the big barefoot running phenomenon. I won't get too much into that because that's a whole other topic in and of itself. But just with these shoes, what they've been shown is that they decrease your running economy, meaning how much oxygen you need to take in to run. If you don't have to be taking in so much oxygen and processing so much work, it's shown to improve performance, improve your time. And there's also been some studies showing that the minimalist type shoes can decrease knee injuries, but often that's because what these shoes do is put a lot more work into your foot and your ankle. They have that smaller or that bendier sole, so that foot will bend a lot more over and over again. You'll kind of get a lot more force through there. So usually the negative downside of this is you're getting a little bit more prone to some ankle and foot injuries. And then the Hokas, these have really come out of the woodwork lately. These are the max cushioning shoes. Everyone knows what the Hokas are. They're massive. They make you taller too, which is a plus. But the other positives to these types of shoes is they may reduce the incident of a MTSS, that what we talked about earlier, that shin splint kind of situation or a stress fracture. And this is because they have so much cushioning in the bottom of the shoe that they're going to take up a lot of that force for you, and rather than throwing it into your shin itself. And also too, I see this a lot on trails, though it does have that really thick cushioning, which we were talking about with the higher cushioning shoes being kind of a problem for not knowing where your foot is on the ground. Hoka comes back out with that. The way they make them is there is a lot of cushioning, but the way they make them allows for a little bit better and easier ankle control. So although you can't feel perhaps the trail as much, the shoe is going to work for you and help control your ankle. That's the positive that they put out there. And another positive too would be, although these are big and bulky shoes, you would think it would kind of slow you down because you're carrying a little bit more on your feet. But the studies have actually shown that there's no change in running economy or even the running kinetic variables. So it doesn't really hamper performance that much, even though these shoes are quite bulky. Okay, we're gonna get into a little bit more running research. So 2 topics. First one being a little bit more of that step rate and cadence. This cadence and step rate is pretty well studied in the literature. This cadence essentially and step rate are not synonymous, but they're related. It just means how many times are you stepping? What is your step rate per minute of running? And I can take a look at that on the treadmill. So this is back to me with the Huddle app, this is slowed down, but I would get your normal running speed over the 30 seconds and figure out what your step rate is. Literature has reported that a good step rate is right around 180 steps per minute. That's pretty high. Usually I don't see that a lot. Even when I've tested myself, I'm a little bit lower than that. So it does take some conscious effort. But if we're able to kind of get into that range, what that will do is the research has been shown that increasing your step rate shows a significant decrease in hip and knee energy absorption and generation, meaning less work for the hip and knee, less peak knee flexion and hip adduction angle, kind of the same thing, less of that predisposing knee factor injuries, less knee extension and hip abduction moment, less braking impulse, which we talked about with that overstriding, right? That ability for that shock to come through your shin. And all in all, it would kind of decrease that peak patellofemoral joint stress, which in general, just what we need to know for this, the simple version of this is if you increase your step rate, it does decrease your incidence of knee pain and some injuries because of all of those factors. So how do we do this? Besides a conscious effort, how do we know exactly what has been going on? Like I said, I can highlight this in the clinic, see where we're at on a normal step rate. And then what we can do in the clinic is use a thing called a metronome. Basically, it's like a beeping scenario. I could set it to that 180 and it'll beep at you every time I want you to take a step, which is quite annoying after a while. So we kind of use it for training purposes. And then I like to recommend my patients to kind of listen to some more upbeat music, kind of get them going a little bit faster. Oftentimes too, there's also some good apps out there. One I've used is called Rock My Run. This allows you to curate some playlists, upload some music, and it will have a selection on what, like if you're going after a certain cadence, it allows you to implement music that has that cadence, and then you just step to the beat of the music. Pretty fun stuff. Other side of running research is going to be that forward trunk lean. I was lucky enough to be a part of this study at Long Beach. Dr. Tang is forefronting this. It was fantastic. Basically, the premise behind this is to increase this forward trunk lean. So essentially means leaning a little bit forward when you run. Only 6 to 8 degrees though, not a ton, just a little bit. What this has been shown to do is decrease your knee extensor moment, decrease your knee flexion angle, all in all, decreasing your knee pain and injuries, because it'll allow that patellofemoral joint specifically to work a little bit better for us. What that kind of, or how it does this is when we lean forward a little bit, we're now using our bigger glute, stronger glute muscles instead of constantly relying on our quads. Runners love to constantly rely on their quads. We could get through our whole life with quads. It's taken me years to train my glutes with squatting and running mechanics to actually work for me. And this is really effective way of doing so while you're running. So how do we do this? In the clinic, what I could do is get you again on the treadmill, and we could do a little bit of cueing, a little bit of, I can measure your trunk angle with my Huddle app and see if we're into that 6, make sure we're not running, we don't want to be too much, right? We want to get that little bit of trunk lean, just enough that we need. And we could do a little bit of mirror feedback, real-time feedback. I could show you a video, a lot of verbal cueing until you kind of get the hang of it. But essentially the verbal cues I'll use is like kind of, when you're running up a hill, you're not going to be running up like this, right? You're going to be running a little bit of that lean, or kind of like you're into the wind, just kind of pushing forward a little bit more. Usually is pretty effective for getting the right positioning. Okay, this is my favorite slide. So that was all research proven. I want a full disclosure here. This is my personal opinions. These are running training myths that I'm going to introduce. This is everything I've learned from myself, my patients, my athletes that I've coached, my friends, everything over the last 15 years of doing this. So enjoy. The first one, I need to run a super high weekly mileage to run a great marathon. I hear this all the time. Training schedules are made for this all the time, to run 70 plus miles. I think in college for the 5K, we were running a 5K, 3.1 miles to a 6K, right around that 3.8 mark. And we were running 70-mile weeks sometimes. So super high weekly mileage. Especially when I got a little bit older out of college, started realizing that this is not necessarily true. You don't need to constantly be pounding the pavement all the time, getting this super high mileage to run a really great marathon. I actually ran my best time, my 3:07 time, when I was running the least and strength training the most. My sister got me into a ton of strength training, got me going on that 4 times a week. Usually I was running maybe 4 or 5 days a week, maybe topping out at 55 miles a week at like my peak. And that's gonna go a little bit more to quality over quantity type of, which I'll illustrate on the next slide. So that's not necessarily true. You don't need to constantly be running and running and running just to run a great marathon. Next is all my training should be running. I don't have time for any other type of training besides running. I hear this all the time. Ideally, I'd like to challenge everybody to remove a few miles from our training plans, remove a few, and then add in some strength training. Because like we said, and everything that I've been illustrating over the past couple of slides has been that is so important for preventing injuries. You can't run a great race if you're injured. You won't run faster if you're injured. So if you can't run in general. So we need to take the steps to strength train to protect the body from all of those injuries that we could be predisposed to if we overtrain. So I always recommend to take a few miles out of that week, really kind of focus on some of that strength instead of constantly adding more mileage and more running. Another one, I need to stick to my training schedule exactly. I'm inadequate if I don't do 8 miles on Tuesday the 8th. I need to do those 8 miles. If not, I'm off my training. I'm behind in my training. I can't. No, not necessarily true. I myself don't like to hold myself to such a strict schedule. For me, it stresses me out. I know it helps people stay on track, but I would like to challenge you again that if you go out on that planned 8-mile run on Tuesday the 8th and you get 2 miles in and all of a sudden you're just not feeling great, you know your body can't handle it. It's going to be a struggle to get that 8 miles. That's when injuries happen. That's when we overtrain. That is our body telling us we're not ready for this on this day. Our bodies oftentimes don't know how to depict stress. They don't know how to separate it. So especially if you're in a time of high emotional, physical, mental, any other social stress out there, your body is thinking that's all kind of in the same thing. And then now you're adding all this physical stress on top of it, and it can just be too much. So that's where you really got to check in with your body, see how you're feeling. And just because your schedule says 8 miles doesn't mean you can't do 4 that day. Doesn't mean you can't do 2 that day. Doesn't mean you can't skip that day. As long as you stay on track as a whole, that's going to benefit you in the long run. And then last one here is I need a specific type of speed workouts in my training to run my whatever it is, 5K, 10K, half, or marathon. I need to go on the track. I need to do mile repeats at this. This is the only thing that's going to help me. Again, not necessarily true. You want to pick the type of speed workout that you enjoy and that relates to your race the most. There is obviously benefits to dropping some really fast speed, especially for the last part of the race. But personally for me, what I found to be most effective is I haven't been on a track in forever. All my speed training, I like being next to the beach better. I like being on the trails. I like doing a little bit longer tempo speed stuff where I get down into that race pace for a good amount of time instead of doing 400s, 1600s on the track repeatedly, really fast and giving it an all out effort. So you really got to find the one that you enjoy, because the one you enjoy, you're going to work harder at. The one you work harder at, you're going to get more benefit out of, and that's going to lead you to faster times. Okay, and then this is just a little sample of a running training schedule. This is one of mine. This is a little bit shorter schedule. Ideally, I would like to have more time, but this is kind of what I had that time, but just to have a good example. As you can see, I only have 1 mileage per week. So I'm only highlighting my long run mileage. That's because, like I said, I very much motivate myself and plan my running up to a race around quality over quantity. I am going to focus, my main focus of the week is my long run on the weekends. That's what I want to prepare for. The rest of the week runs is all maintenance. It's all getting myself ready. I don't want to torch myself out 8 miles a day during the week and then have my long run be affected on the weekends, because that's the run that's going to make the most of our training. So I like to go a little bit kind of an up and down method where I push it a little bit, I come back down a little bit, maybe throw in a holiday half or a half marathon in there somewhere, something quick, get some race confidence, and then of course taper down next to the marathon. These are just some upcoming SoCal races. I apologize, some of these dates are wrong. Everything keeps changing because of COVID, but these are some really great ones. My favorite, albeit the Surf City Half Marathon this year on September 11th in Huntington Beach. That one's super fast if you're looking for some confidence. Another really fast one is the San Diego Holiday Half. That one's really great. You end up on Del Mar State Beach. It's beautiful. And then these are other local races kind of in all Southern California. And then I've been doing looking into some local running groups. I've been speaking a lot with the Seaside Running Group. They seem fantastic. I haven't got out to a session yet, but I'm planning on to soon. These are more of the North County ones. There's a ton in South County, San Diego, but North County, where I was still trying to find some stuff. So here's some good websites for you to look into if you're looking to get involved somewhere. And then I want to take it back to Longevity PT. This is our clinic. This is where we operate. We have 3 different locations. We have a Bressie Ranch, that's where I'm right now. That's in Carlsbad. Then we have a La Costa, which is also in another part of Carlsbad. And then we have a San Diego clinic, which is down right by San Diego State in Mission Gorge. That's where all those lovely PTs that I showed you the pictures of are operating out of. And in each of our clinics, we offer free injury screens or wellness screens. That's what Rachel mentioned at the beginning. A quick 20-minute assessment to kind of see what's going on and see if PT is something that you need to keep coming back to, and we'll get you on the schedule, that kind of thing. Or if there's some form situation we can kind of look at before you get on a run, just like all the stuff Rachel mentioned before. And then that down there was the beautiful Alter G, which I'll give you a little peek right here. There's ours. It's awesome. Same one in the video right there, but I highly recommend getting on one of those if you're having an injury and trying to get back into running. And then, above all, this is kind of my wrap-up slide. I want to highlight that running is not bad for you. I hear that all the time. It is not bad for you. It's not bad for your knees. Running incorrectly is bad for you. Running with those form malfunctions over and over and over again, overtraining with those form malfunctions or a little bit decreased strength is bad for you. Running innately is not bad for you. It's actually very good for you in a very number of ways. And I'm sure you've all experienced that if you've been after a great race, like I am showing here. But above all, you want to enjoy the process. Don't put yourself through this sport if you don't enjoy it. It's not worth it. It's supposed to be fun. I'll be the first one to tell you that. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something you enjoy. For me, especially, it's been a really fantastic way for me to give my post-athletic career in college, myself some purpose in my training. What am I training for? What am I working for? What are my goals that I want to accomplish so that I can take that personal experience, that triumph, that defeat, that success into motivating my patients. So I can really kind of feel that out and really get a good outlook for myself. And it's supposed to be really, really, really fun. Top right-hand corner photo is me running my one and only Boston race that I was able to do in the pouring rain. It was still really fun. My dad snapped a really funny photo of me there. So above all, I just want to mention that run if you enjoy it, and if you don't, find something that you do. And here's my resources. And then now is when we'll open it up to any questions. Thank you.